And now, part two of Working the System. Slumped in his chair in the cramped, dimly lit office, Glazier only half listened to Negron's report on their experience at Lost Hills. Fortunately, the cop wasn't speaking to Glazier, but to his boss, Captain Pelreski. Glazier decided to take the opportunity to catch his breath and collect his thoughts. At first glance, Pelreski wasn't exactly the image of law enforcement. Glazier suspected the man's glassy eyes and 2-day-old shadow covering his sagging face were not solely attributable to long work hours. From the stench in the air, no doubt a bottle of relaxation was hidden well within reach. "What about you, Glazier?" Glazier sat upright in his chair, feeling the heat of embarrassment as both cops stared at him, awaiting his input on something he hadn't been paying attention to. So much for collecting his thoughts. Sorry, I didn't catch up. Can you confirm the identity of the guy in the hologram?" Yeah, it was definitely Michaud. Pelreski lifted the tablet computer that Glazier had found at the old house. "But tell me about this." That particular tablet belonged to an officer I served with on the Kindred. "How can you tell?" Negron asked. Glazier retrieved the tablet from Pelreski and pressed a series of buttons on its screen. He turned the display screen toward the two cops. "Sergeant Amira Eklund. She was on my security team." "You think she's involved with Michaud?" Glazier chuckled and shook his head. "Highly unlikely. They couldn't stand each other, unless something drastic happened since I left the service. From the short time I knew him, Michaud never got close to anyone but his androids. Besides, I don't think Eklund had anything against Jorgen." "What about Michaud?" "Oh, absolutely. Near the end of my second tour aboard the Kindred, the fundamentalists passed their law banning artificial intelligence. System High Command ordered Jorgen to terminate the androids we were testing. Michaud refused to comply, so Jorgen had him arrested. Then he ordered me to destroy the androids. Eklund assisted. She hated androids, as much as the captain did." "So it's a strong possibility that Eklund could be Michaud's next target. In that case, I'd like us to reach her first." Pelreski nodded in agreement. "Negron, find out where this woman is now. If she's still on system duty, we'll make a call through proper channels. If she's a civilian, maybe Mr. Glazier can pay her a visit. Any progress on Zamora's background check?" "Still nothing before his military service. I'm digging deeper through some unofficial channels." "I don't want to know. Do we have any background on Michaud?" "I started investigating Geary Corporation's old government contracts. Since the system took over, they've been reduced to manufacture mechanical parts and medical equipment. But 2 years ago, they supplied over a dozen androids to the military." "Yeah, I was there," Glazier cut in. "And I can tell you that all of the androids on that mission were killed, either during the raid on the Ganzing Belt or afterward, when we were ordered to terminate the survivors. I don't know what else you're going to learn from Geary Corp. According to System High Command, those are the only androids in existence." Pelreski sat back in his chair and ran a hand through his receding hair. "When have you ever trusted the system?" It was nearly midnight by the time they left Pelreski's office. Negron called it a night, but Glazier's concern for Eklund overpowered his mounting fatigue. He volunteered to stay and locate her in the system. Pelreski directed him to a workstation with access to law enforcement and transportation databases. It took only 15 minutes to find her. She had just completed her third military tour and was currently living in Pongjang's historic district. He called her immediately, but there was no answer. Pongjang was only 6 hours by shuttle. If he went home first to shower and change, he could sleep on the way and be at Eklund's door by the time she awoke, if she still abided by military time. Glazier returned to his apartment in the passenger seat of a patrol skiff, compliments of Pelreski. Before cleaning himself up, he took advantage of his haggard appearance and called out sick from work via holo message. "Just hope I don't end up calling out dead one of these days." 6 hours later, Glazier approached Eklund's residence. Like the others along the row, it was an old 3-story brick home, converted into apartments. This entire part of Ponjong was a historic district, with some buildings dating back 2 centuries. It was a different atmosphere than what he was accustomed to in Yakina Bay, with everything there high-tech and modern, always on the cutting edge. He jogged up the concrete stairway to the front door and entered the foyer. Directly ahead, a locked steel door prevented access to the apartments. Mounted on the left wall was a panel with 3 buttons lined up vertically and a speaker beneath. Each button was labeled with the name of one of the residents. Eklund was on the 3rd floor. Glazier pressed the top button and waited. For several seconds there was no response. In his haste to get here, the thought had never occurred to him that she might not be home when he arrived. He was about to press the button again when Eklund's face appeared on the screen. "Whoever you are, it's early and I haven't had my coffee yet. Just warning you." Glazier leaned in and grinned. "Hey, Mira, it's Cam. I'm sorry, can you take a step back? All I can see is your chin and the speaker muffles your voice if you're too close." Right." Glazier moved away from the wall. His confident grin shrank. "Hey, Mira, it's Cam Glazier." "Oh." He held his breath, contemplating the thoughts running through her mind. Would she give him the time of day? She looked exactly the same. Almost. "You've grown your hair out." "I'm a civilian now," Eklund replied, as if reminding Glazier that times do indeed change. "You're still wearing it short. Then again, you always were low maintenance. Gotta say, Cam, I never thought I'd see you again. I'm sorry about not keeping in touch, but I wasn't sure if I should. It probably wouldn't have worked out between us anyway. So what brings you to my door?" "I need to talk to you. In person, if possible. It's urgent, Mira." The screen went blank. The door buzzed. "You'd better start by telling me who I can talk to about this now." "I'm sorry, Detective, but we simply cannot discuss the details of any system military contract without the explicit permission of system top brass. The technology you refer to was banned 2 years ago. All such records are sealed." Negron sat back slowly in his chair, glaring at the holographic bust of Geary Corporation's public relations representative. "Look, pal, I understand your position. Now you need to see mine. I really don't want to bring your ass up on charges for obstructing a murder investigation. Clear?" The man did not answer immediately, as if taking a moment to consider his options. Finally, he forced a smile. "Of course, Mr. Negron. It is certainly not our intention to interfere in such a grievous matter. I'll see what I can do and get back to you." "How long?" "I'll attempt to have an answer for you within the hour." "Good enough." Negron leaned forward, bringing his face closer to the hologram. "But remember, if I don't hear from you by then, you will hear from me." "Throw your coat anywhere." Eklund waved toward the living room as Glazier entered her apartment. "Can I get you something? I have water, coffee, tea." "Iced tea would be great if you have it. Thanks." Dressed in sweatpants and t-shirt, Eklund made her way into the narrow kitchen. "You still drink that in the morning? Oh yeah, I forgot. You hate coffee. I guess some things never change." Glazier folded his coat and placed it on the cushion beside him as he took a seat on the couch. A subtle movement on the floor in front of him caught his attention. Underneath an antique coffee table, a black and orange rabbit stretched itself out on the carpet and yawned. Its colors ran side to side in thick alternating bands along its back, and divided its head almost perfectly down the center, such that the right side was black and the left orange. Glazier had never seen anything like it. A large patch of skin was missing from the animal's left side, leaving wiring and circuitry visibly exposed. The rabbit regarded him with wide eyes as it angled its ears forward. Eklund returned and handed a glass of iced tea to Glazier before lowering herself into a plush recliner with a mug of coffee. "That's Gabby. She's a harlequin rabbit and in need of parts to get her jumping again. They're on order." "Probably still cheaper than the real thing." "Well, someday I hope to afford a live rabbit, like the ones I grew up with. Our world has become too artificial. It seems life has lost its value when it can be so easily replaced with cheap imitations." Glazier took a sip of iced tea, knowing full well she wasn't simply referring to rabbits. So, where are you living now? Yakina Bay. Looking beyond her for just a moment, Glazier could see straight into the kitchen and through the window to the hospital across the street, where the sun was reflecting off one of the many windows. You came all the way across the continent instead of just calling me? Must be serious. It is. I'm working with the sissies, Glazier said, using a common slang term for system police that typically carried a disrespectful and utterly false connotation. He knew that, of course, and had already made a mental note to avoid the term around Negron. They came to me when Captain Jorgen was murdered. What? The color drained from Eklund's face. I'm going to need something stronger than coffee. You want to take this from the top? She remained silent for several minutes, absorbing every word of Glazier's account of his nearly fatal adventure in Lost Hills the night before. The hologram was Ali Michaud. I don't know what he has planned, but I think he's targeting crew members from the Kindred. I'll never forget the day we had to kill his androids. Michaud was beside himself. Before I confined him to his quarters, he told Jorgen that it wasn't over. Sounds like Michaud made good on his threat. But he might not have acted alone. Also, Commander Zamora is missing, and for some reason, System High Command isn't being forthcoming with any information on him. Hell, for all we know, Michaud might have killed him too. You served with Zamora longer than I. Did anything unusual happen after I left? Actually, yeah. About 5 weeks before I was discharged, Zamora was relieved of duty. They said he had a serious illness. That's all we were told. I never saw him again after that, even when we made it back to port. Rumors began flying that he had a nervous breakdown. Whatever it was, I really didn't care. My tour was over, and I just wanted out. I never heard anything about him after that. Draining her mug, Eklund set it down on the coffee table. She reached down and scratched behind Gabby's ear before continuing. I'd like to know what the hell Michaud was doing with my tablet, and how he was able to smuggle it off the Kindred. Well, I can't answer that. But the fact that I found it in that house is what brought me out here. We think you may be next on Michaud's hit list. Eklund's eyes widened. Why? Because I helped you waste his precious androids? Does that mean you're on his list too? We were following orders, Cam. I never had anything against Michaud personally. You were vocal with your opinion that his androids were nothing but property. That always rubbed him the wrong way. You know me, Cam. I tell it like it is. Eklund rose from her chair and carried the empty drinkware into the kitchen. As she rinsed them out and placed them in the dishwasher, Glazier's attention drifted back to the kitchen window. This time, an immaculately polished gold and crimson turboskiff rose slowly into view from the street below. It's a little early for sky racing. Thinking nothing of it, he merely waited for it to continue its ascent. When it did not, Glazier stood and stared at the craft hanging just outside, the sound of its thrusters barely audible through the double-pane glass. Mira, ever see that burner before? Eklund stepped into the kitchen doorway, her back to the window. Sorry, did you say something? I couldn't hear you over the running water. Glazier pointed at the skiff and immediately froze. The passenger side window was now down, and an automatic weapon was pointed directly at the window. Down! As Eklund turned to look at the source of his alarm, Glazier leapt over the coffee table and tackled her to the floor, just before a spray of bullets blasted through the kitchen window. The pair pressed themselves against the cabinets, out of the gunman's sights. The barrage continued for several more seconds before all was silent. Glazier risked a glance through the shattered window. The skiff was gone. Eklund bolted into another room and emerged a few moments later with 2 high-caliber handguns. She tossed one to Glazier. He caught it with one hand. They're gone, but they'll be back if they think we're still alive. I suggest we... The living room window erupted in a torrent of glass and bullets. Eklund and Glazier dove behind the couch. As before, the salvo eventually stopped, but this time the skiff remained hovering outside. The masked gunman was reloading. Seizing the opportunity, Glazier charged the window and fired several rounds, one of which bored through the gunman's forearm and found its mark in the driver's temple. The man slumped over the skiff's controls, blood streaming from his wound. The vehicle lurched sideways and began spinning out of control. With a shout, the gunman dropped his weapon somewhere inside the skiff before kicking the passenger door open. He leapt from the vehicle to the sidewalk 3 stories below. Incredibly, he picked himself up and disappeared into an alley. The craft's wild journey ended shortly after in an explosive collision with the hospital. The resulting shockwave rocked Eklund's building, knocking pictures off the wall and sending shelves crashing to the floor. Within seconds, sirens wailed as police cars and fire trucks surrounded the area. We're going to have a lot of explaining to do. Glazier turned to find Eklund beside him. You okay? Fine, but look at this friggin' mess. Eklund took a quick survey of the shambles as she brushed off her clothes. She tossed her gun onto the sofa and lowered herself to one knee beside the coffee table. Reaching under, she picked up the quivering rabbit and cradled it in her arms. It appeared to have survived the assault unscathed. Did you get a good look at them? Glazier shook his head. Driver and shooter were both masked. We're going to have cops banging on my door any minute now. Eklund ran a hand through her disheveled hair. It didn't help. What were you going to suggest? What? Before all this bullshit happened, you started to suggest something. I suggest we get you the hell out of here. Dinner at my place? In the pouring rain of mid-afternoon, 2 System PD patrol cars came to a screeching halt outside Glazier's apartment building in Yakina Bay. The passenger door of the lead car was wide open even before the vehicle came to a complete stop. From the entranceway of the high-rise, Glazier and Eklund waited as a flushed and haggard Pelreski bolted out of the car, slamming the door closed behind him. A total of 3 uniformed cops climbed out of the cars and followed the captain into the building. What the hell happened out there? I just got off the screen with the chief of police in Ponjang and she's pissed as hell. I think Michaud sent some hired guns. After hasty introductions, Glazier led Eklund, Pelreski, and the 3 officers into an elevator and up to his apartment. Along the way, Glazier provided the details of the attack. But that he might know where all of his targets were living after they left system duty, Pelreski paced the length of Glazier's modest living room. He might be after you next. We were friends. I respected him. Despite what happened to his androids, he never blamed me. Eklund snickered. Apparently he hated my guts. We never got along. I told him more than once his androids were just property, which is probably what made me today's target. You said the shooter jumped out of the skiff 3 stories off the ground and ran away like it was nothing? Now you tell me that ain't a goddamn android. I find that hard to believe, Glazier said. Where the hell could Michaud whip up another batch of them undetected? Fire crews found something interesting in the basement of that house you and Negron visited in Lost Hills. It was a laboratory of some kind, what was left of it. Computer equipment, chemicals, freezers with organic compounds, even a clean room with solid steel operating tables and various tools. Michaud was making more of his killer toys, Eklund said. Negron went out to Geary Corporation this morning to check on that lead he talked about. He doesn't know anything about this yet, but I expect him back in a few hours. I'll send him over ASAP. Glazier, if that shooter recognized you, then friend or not, Michaud may try to put the hit on you next. I'll assign 2 men to watch this place overnight. It's all I can spare for now. With any luck, Michaud might lay low for a while after Ponjang. Michaud fell into step beside the android as he limped off the shuttle onto the platform. The engineer frowned at the sight of the blood-stained bandage wrapped around the other's forearm. You're injured. Looks worse than it is. The pair turned into the nearest restroom. After ensuring that they were alone, the android slipped off the bandage and tossed it away. He grinned as he held up a dark and thickly muscled arm that was nearly healed. Only nickel-sized scabs remained of the entry and exit wounds. Nothing your nanites couldn't repair. My ankle was broken before I boarded the shuttle. It's now almost fully healed. Eklund? The android shook his head. She had help. He killed Darrell. Glazier. The android nodded. Michaud placed a consoling hand on his creation's broad shoulder. He had suspected that Glazier might interfere now that he was working with the cops. That was disappointing. Aboard the Kindred, he had treated Michaud and his androids with respect. And it was with deep reluctance that he'd followed Jorgen's orders to exterminate them. Today, however, Glacier had obviously chosen the wrong side. So be it. That just means we have one more target. And I suspect we'll get a 2-for-1 deal. No doubt Glacier would protect Eklund, take her somewhere he considered safe, and remain close to her side. Michaud spoke softly as he and his companion exited the restroom and descended the stairs toward the street. We need to lay low for a while, until things cool off. We'll strike again soon. I promise you that. In a plush conference room on the top floor of the Geary Corporation factory building, Lieutenant Negron folded his coat over his arm and stepped over to the window that ran the length of the room. Pushing aside the vertical blinds, he looked out upon the cityscape. In the distance, the sun had already dipped behind the countless office buildings and factories that comprised Merced's industrial sector. Far below, across the expansive courtyard, Negron could see the silhouette of his police skiff atop the corporate parking deck. He watched as employees and visitors alike traversed the concrete and polyglass bridge that connected the deck with the factory building. He stared down at the human traffic, pondering for a moment which of them actually fit the term human, and which did not. How many androids did the Geary Corporation actually crank out before the system shut them down? How many are still hiding in plain sight, indistinguishable from real people? Negron's feelings about artificial intelligence had always been ambivalent, as long as it was contained in some remote computer lab. When it begins walking the streets, maybe it's time to draw the line. Behind him, someone cleared her throat. Negron whirled to find a young, full-figured brunette watching him with narrow eyes behind rectangular glasses. She stood at the head of the conference table, everything crisp and perfect, from the curve-hugging business suit down to the black high-heeled boots polished to a shine. Good afternoon, Detective. As Negron approached, she extended a hand. Dr. Brenda Sang, Vice President of Operations. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea? No, thank you. I'm trying to cut back on caffeine. Sang gestured toward an empty chair as she took a seat at the head of the table. I understand you're interested in knowing more about our old Android product lines. May I ask how this information connects to your investigation? Well, I'm simply covering all bases, especially any projects led by Dr. Oliver Michaud. Beyond that, I'm afraid the rest is privileged information. Well, that works both ways, Detective, but I'll show you all that I can. She glanced down at the table and tapped a finger on its surface. A small screen appeared, casting Seng's narrow face in a pale blue glow. She slid her fingers along the screen and pressed several buttons. Across the room, a post-production inventory hologram displayed rotating close-up shots of several Trooper-class androids, one after the other, in a series. All of them had been assigned to the Kindred. Sang recited the spec sheet for each android as they appeared. When the presentation was complete, she passed the memory stick to Negron. These files contain all the information in the holo you just watched, and a little more, including all unclassified information on Dr. Oliver Michaud. Negron slipped the memory stick into his shirt pocket. When was the last time you saw or heard from Dr. Michaud? He left the company about 4 months after returning from the Ganzing Belt. No one's heard from him since. Negron leaned forward over the table. Think carefully, Doctor. Could Michaud create new androids by himself with the proper facilities? I suppose, but it would take more time. How much time? 2 years, perhaps? He would need extensive resources, only some of which could be obtained legally, while the rest could be bought on the black market. If Dr. Michaud has created new androids for the sole purpose of murder, then there are some things you should know. Such as? Sang turned off the touchscreen and sat forward in her chair. She paused, as if uncomfortable with what she was about to reveal. Our first batch of androids were destroyed shortly after their test mission aboard the Kindred. That is, all but 2. What I'm about to tell you is no longer classified, but still considered proprietary, so I cannot turn over this information to you without a warrant. However, under the circumstances, I am permitted to show you, provided you sign the non-disclosure agreement that will appear on your screen momentarily. A rectangular section of table lit up beneath Negron's folded hands. He glanced over the document and hastily pressed the green Agree button at the bottom. The tabletop went dark. Thank you. In addition to the Trooper class androids, System High Command asked us to develop two other models. We called them the Sentinel and Siren lines. One prototype from each line was created, male and female respectively. Both were programmed with similar skills, tactical, navigational, hand-to-hand combat, as well as superior strength and agility. Only a select few people knew about them. Dr. Geary, Dr. Michaud, the technicians who worked on the projects, and a few top officials in the military. Not even the androids knew what they were. They were given memories and experiences taken from real people's lives and customized for them. We even gave them hobbies. As far as these prototypes were concerned, they were as human as you or I. Negron nodded slowly. No wonder why the fundamentalists shut you down. Even I have to admit that's pretty damn scary, Doctor. We were not reckless, Detective. These higher-purposed androids were programmed with many of the same fail-safes as those before them. For example, every android we produced was programmed to preserve human life, even at the cost of its own. Negron raised an eyebrow. Yes, Detective, we thought of the androids as living beings. You might consider that the height of hubris, but that's a debate for another time. The point is, if Dr. Michaud is out there creating androids using plans and formulas from the Sentinel or Siren projects, he could easily disregard these very fail-safes that he created. Can you show me what these prototypes look like? Sang activated her touchscreen once again. After a few more taps, the computer authenticated her identity with a retinal scan. Sang then looked across the room and spoke in a wistful tone. They both had so much promise. Negron followed her gaze just as the two rotating holograms appeared in the corner. He recognized them instantly. Oh, shit. Stepping into the bathroom, Glacier stole a glance at the closed shower curtain before hanging a robe on the hook beside the sink. Turning to leave, he almost made it out of the room when the sound of running water from the shower abruptly shut off. Cam? Glacier halted at the doorway. Yeah, sorry to intrude. I just found a robe for you. It's hanging by the sink. Thanks. Eklund popped her head out of the back of the shower curtain. Am I holding you up? Not at all. Take your time. I'll be out here if you need anything. I just thought you might want to get in here. After you're with me. Eklund pushed the shower curtain aside. I certainly wouldn't mind the company. After lifting off from Geary Corporation's office tower, Negron decided to check in with headquarters on the off chance that Pelreski had news on Glazier's search for his ex-partner. The chief inspector not only had an update, but an alarming tale that heightened Negron's sense of urgency. He summarized his own findings to Pelreski before signing off. It was well after sunset in the city by the time Negron arced the skiff around a burned-out skyscraper on a direct course to Glazier's apartment building. Despite the downpour spattering the windshield, Negron pushed the skiff to its maximum speed. He activated the incident lights on the roof for added emphasis. After learning what these two particular androids were capable of, he was taking no chances.